Greetings to you all. Today's teaching I've titled, Help, He Cried Out to Heaven. And it's coming in two parts. This is the first part. Now, this teaching stems from Genesis chapter 4, verse 26. It says, Seth also had a son whose name was Enosh. At that time, people began to pray, to call on the name of the Lord. He knew that help was coming because he had been told that there would be the seed of the woman who would be their salvation, who would save them all and who would defeat Satan once and for all. But like all of us, when we're in a desperate situation, we like the solution to come sooner rather than later. So by the time she had Seth, she thought that was the answer to the problem. I don't know whether she may have, she obviously must have construed it that the seed of the woman in this case was Seth, and he was the solution to all their problem. Everything was going to be restored to what it was before the fall. But that's not what was actually meant. He was talking about a seed that was going to come from a woman, not immediately. But that seed, as it turns out, was from heaven, was God himself, who came through God's line, which is his people, the Israelites, and his from his tribe, the house of Judah, David, Jesus, who the Savior was going to come from that line. He's the David. Jesus Christ. But she thought Seth was going to be the solution. Anyway, as I just said, obviously things on earth at that time were not looking very good at all. After the fall, they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden represented God's people, who were separated from the rest of the people, which will be Israel, and then later, there's a precursor to what was going to happen later, or the ideal situation, that his people were going to, were given Eden. They were to cultivate it and expand and take it over, and obviously they were supposed to expand the territory, to work the ground and expand the territory, and actually evangelize to the other people who were outside Eden, but who were also human beings. That was the whole plan. If you can look at it that way. Yeah, that was the plan, that his people would evangelize and preach and expand territory and expand the frontiers of Eden to encompass the whole world. That was the whole plan, the whole world. So now, that plan, yes, had suffered a setback when Adam fell. So now he was kicked out of Eden. So there was no possibility of Eden expanding, because now he's lost dominion of Eden. He's lost dominion of the earth. He is now just another human being on earth, even though he's God's child, chosen one. But there was some repair work and restoration that was supposed to take place. He was to be restored. Yeah. And the book of Adam and Eve is a very good example of the struggles and the struggles that Adam underwent, and his wife, the regrets, the contrition, and it was something that they didn't imagine life was going to turn out that way. They were hoping that God would restore them quickly, but as it turned out, that is not what happened. It took longer than expected. So the fall had consequences in the sense that because he lost dominion, therefore the plan, which was to evangelize and expand the frontiers of Eden to encompass the whole wide world, had to suffer a temporary setback. God had the plans of how he was going to restore everything. So anyway, the help was coming. but it was not, and he did not understand it as God. He did not fully understand God's plan because I don't think God revealed it fully. He just told him that a woman's seed was going to solve that problem. Seth is not the solution. But Seth is the line that he had chosen. That was the only line that was there to perpetuate his bloodline, his chosen people. So, having said that, we now come back to our story in Genesis 4, verses 16 to 24. And here we have Cain, after he has killed, murdered his brother. Out of jealousy, and because obviously I think he had he was not inclined to God. He's the Esau in this setup. Yes, and I've said in another teaching that they were actually like concurred. I may be wrong, but that Cain and Abel were twins, but just like Esau and Jacob were twins. But anyway, that doesn't really change much. That doesn't change the thrust of the teaching, whether you accept it or not. They were brothers. So we had the one line represented by Cain. When he was kicked out, he went to this place, the place in Nod, and obviously there were people there. So that's the suggestion that, like I said earlier, there was God's people in the Garden of Eden. The other people were outside the Garden of Eden, and living parallel lives, so to speak. It was God's intention that after Adam had totally expanded and covered the whole of Eden, he would expand increase, would cross the frontiers and go and encroach and take on territory of the pagan world, so to speak. Well, that didn't happen. So Cain is cursed, he's kicked out, and he continues with his bloodline. And it's all very ungodly. Anyway, he marries a woman, and then he has a son Enoch, and then he decides to build a city after his son Enoch. God was totally out of the picture. And he thought that because God had been long-suffering with him when he killed his brother, that God was almost like a stamp of approval on his behavior, but that was not the case. So by the time Seth has Enosh, there is already concern upon the earth, which is the first paragraph, the scripture that I read earlier, which is Genesis 4:26, that the world, his line and Seth and all his children, they started praying out to the Lord, crying about how preaching the word to try and getting territory and expanding within the pagan world outside Eden. That was the plan. But there is a translation here which looks at it from the other side. It's a flip coin. One is talking about them calling on the name of God for help. They'll help because they wanted to expand and to maintain their identity, their bloodline. And the other one talks about the converse side of it, which is that at that time, profaning the name of the Lord had begun, which is basically Cain and the rest of the lot who were working and striding ahead under the leadership of the serpent. So we saw here, we already see two bloodlines. At that time, when they started crying out, it wasn't long. By the time I think we get to Lamech, the job will appear, the hegemony of Satan over the pagan world was almost complete, so to speak. Because here we talk about Lamech, he had two wives, Adah and Zillah, and he is on record as having boasted. He says that Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for hitting me. If Cain's killer is punished 7 times, then Lamech's killer, Lamech killer will be punished 77 times, saying that God puts a great premium on his life, that it will not be a life for a life. It should be to 77 times that for him, for the just killing Lamech, that's the blood that he would demand. So here we are talking about Satan's bloodline having greatly grown and striding and confident and boisterous. And I may just add that his children of Lamech, one of them was Jabal. He became the first man to live in tents and raise cattle consistent with his father, who had been banished and was a wanderer. And the other one, Jubal, is the one who designed and played musical instruments, the harp and the flute. And in the case of Adah, and then the other son, Tubal Cain, is credited with making tools of war out of bronze and iron. So here we have the military side of it, the military force, which is basically a means of forcing one's will upon other people by force. You have the musical side, which is basically to gain control of the hearts and the minds of the people by seduction. And then the two women, Adah, the emphasis was on decorating, and the daughter, Nama, she was now credited with being very beautiful. So the emphasis here was everything external and nothing godly about anything that they were doing. So now we have 2 lines, and this is what is confirmed in Genesis 3:15. It says, when God is now passing judgment, it says, I will make you and the woman enemies to each other. I'll place hostility, enmity between you and the woman. Your descendants, the seeds of her descendants, will be, and her seed, her descendant will be enemies. One of her descendants, of the woman, the one who's going to come out of a woman, and here we are looking forward to Mary, Jesus' mother, will crush your head. That is, Satan is being told that directly. And but you, in the whole process of the fight, what you will do, you will bite and bruise his heel. That's the expanded version. The amplified classical version reads, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will bruise fatally and tread your head and crush your head. But you will you will lie in wait and bruise his heel. So this is the thing now. We now have 2 bloodlines at war here. And this is the story of the Bible. We have 2 kingdoms at war. And represented by bloodlines. We have Cain on the one hand, and we have Seth, shall we say Adam on the other hand. Because I accept that he repented and he was forgiven and taken back into the fold. So now this is where we are. 2 bloodlines at war, perpetual war, whether you like it or not. That's why they say, the Bible says that you do not fight flesh and blood. It's a spiritual war. Manifesting on earth, but it's the forces behind the bloodlines are spiritual. Now we'll come into the spiritual side of it, of the bloodline, say Cain's bloodline, a little later on in part 2. But immediately what happened is now, after Israel were released and the Exodus, they were taken out of, they marched out under the full gaze of the world, out of Egypt. The whole world knew about them. They were taken out, the sea split, and they walked through. It was to astonishment and every instilled fear in the surrounding tribes, and the whole world knew about what God had done, because it never been happened before, and there's no other God. There's no God who's ever done anything since then or will ever be able to do anything like that. But anyway, this is what happened. So they were let out, they were set free, and it's we go to Numbers 13:32. So now, whilst they had come out of Egypt, they were supposed to be going straight into the promised land. So what was decided was that scouts will be sent into Canaan to survey the land and to see its suitability, or to confirm its suitability and appropriateness, because they'd already been told that it's a land flowing with milk and honey. So it says, so those men, with the Israelites, the scouts were sent in to explore and the land, which they did, and they came back with a bad report, and they said the land that we explored is too large to conquer. Now that's a bad report. And the people we saw are very tall, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. That's the amplified emphasis. The contemporary English version reads, and in fact we saw the Nephilim, who are the ancestors of Anakim. They are too big that we felt as small as grasshoppers. There's a translation which actually talks about that the land is too large to conquer, and it devours its inhabitants. I think the reference here is to perhaps one interpretation is, all these giants, what happened to other normal sized people such as ourselves? So they must have been eaten up somehow. They're no longer there. We just see all these giants. That's on the extreme side. But I think they're also saying that there was no chance in heaven for the size men of their stature to conquer these giants. So that's a bad report, and as a result of that, they were punished for 40 years. They wanted in the wilderness being developed. Everything for God is got a purpose to strengthen you and to give you a new perspective. To make you warriors, because you come from slavery. So obviously the idea of fighting and believing God, the difficulty, they had their own doubts. And as a result, when they did go in eventually into Canaan, later on in Ezra, in 19, it says, now this is Ezra talking to the people after they'd come back from Babylon. Obviously there's a problem in Canaan. That's where they were. They'd taken over the land. It says, we should not again break your commands by allowing marriages, intermarrying with these wicked, detestable, abominable people. Because when they came back, they discovered a lot of Israelis had married the foreign wives. If we did, you would get angry enough and you'll be angry enough. Wouldn't you be angry enough to destroy us? And none of us will be left alive if you were to destroy everyone, because they all have sinned. So now the intermarrying now is in the context of marrying these foreign people. But the foreign women is because they are a hybrid between fallen angels and the daughters of man, creating these hybrids, these giants who were bulldozing their way all over the world and pulling their weight and their height and crushing everything and anything that came their way. And now to do that, it would be to, if they were to have continued with these marriages, they were going to contaminate the bloodline of God, which is represented in Israel. So they were then called upon to divorce these women. So now we know there's a biblical basis for divorce, which is basically adultery, because when you have a relationship with people who are not of your own kind, it's not allowed. People outside your line, in this case Israel, they were supposed to keep themselves apart. So they had to divorce, so they left those women and their children, because when you have children with those kind of people, the children are anything but good. They're just as bad as their mothers. So now Israel had an experience and an encounter with this phenomenon earlier when Jacob there and Abraham were wandering, traveling to and fro within the land of Canaan to see, to evaluate his inheritance. It's in Genesis 34, verse 2 and then 8 to 10. Then it talks about when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the region, saw her. This is Diana, Jacob's son, Jacob's daughter. He took her and he lay with her by force. So that's the kind of culture we are talking about here, rape. Then Haman talked to Diana's brothers and said, my son Shechem, that's his father, the son of Shechem, my son Shechem is deeply in love with your daughter. Please let us marry her, for him to take us his wife, marry her, make our people, marry her, intermarry with our people. Your sons will have daughters, can get wives from us, and we will get out your daughter, and we'll give your women to our men as wives. So basically this was going to be intermarriage on both sides, because of this, and basically to consolidate bonds. But Jacob was afraid because I think he had that spirit of fear, which he inherited from his father. I don't know, from his grandfather and father. And he was not very comfortable with doing anything about it. But his sons, Jacob's sons, Simeon, I think, the brothers, they did the right thing. They went and they slaughtered these people, which is this is a precursor of what they were supposed to do when they enter into Canaan formally to take it over. Kill them, have nothing to do with them, because we cannot have mixtures. We cannot intermarry with these people and pollute our bloodline. And by so doing, they'll be weakening our bloodline. So that's why Christian women are not supposed to marry pagans, and pagans want to marry Christians because they want to corrupt them. But this is the whole theory. This bloodline thrust to everything that happens in the Bible. It's a war between two families. Now, when they went into later on, when they went into Canaan to take it over, the Hivites, they deceived them by the Gibeonites. They deceived them and says, we come from very far, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we want to make a pact with you, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And then someone was inspired by God, says, but perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you? And of course they deceived them, says, no, we come from very far. But what God was saying, that if you had asked me, I would have told you, but you didn't bother to ask. So therefore you are stuck with your commitment that you made, and you cannot break it. But the point here is that deception is part of that other bloodline strategy, deceit strategy, to deceive people so that they can come in among you. But of course, they were able to limit their involvement. They were just basically made laborers to serve in the temple, which was good because hopefully in that spirit, that spirit will be calmed down and will be eradicated over time. It will evangelize and speak to them. But the point I'm basically making here is that these two bloodlines were at war, and the Hivites were bent. The Satan's bloodline will get in by hook or by crook. Deception is okay with them. It's a part of a strategy. In Daniel 2:40, chapter 2:40, verse 41 to 44, it reads, "And as you saw the feet and toes partly baked clay, and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but there shall be in it some of the firmness and strength of iron, just as you saw iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet are partly iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly bristle and broken." In Satan's quest to take over the world and to subdue and dominate and dominate and control and bring into submission the God's people, it's not going to be easy. There will be differences because of difference of ideology and these things that they have to overcome. And these are, and so he had to develop certain strategies on how to overcome and remain strong and subdue, because basically the kingdom here, we can liken it to the feudal system, where you have the king, the priest, the knights, the merchants, and then you have the working class people, the peasants. The whole idea is that the top strata, they are clued in as to what is actually happening, but the poor people are totally burdened and kept burdened like as slaves. That their concern in life is they don't think very far. They just downbeat and they are totally dominated. It's almost like they have no hope in the world, and that's how they keep them suppressed. So we have the people in control and the people who are being controlled. And now the people who are being controlled here are God's people, until Jesus came and says, no, you actually are very powerful. Don't you realize how powerful you are? And this is the message that came through when he established his people, the Israelites, that you are a powerful people. For as long as you are with me and you remain faithful to me, we are in control and we are powerful. There's no one who can come anywhere near us. In verse 43, it reads, "And as you saw the iron mixed with clay, with iron and clay, so they shall mingle themselves in the seed of men in marriage bonds, but they will not hold together. For two such elements or ideologies can never harmonize, even as iron does not mingle itself with clay." So now this strategy, the obvious one is that we are talking about within the people who are the result of the intermarrying or the union between spirits, fallen angels, and the sons of men, who have evolved a theology, a philosophy, a paradigm, that they are in fact rulers of this earth by divine right, because they come of a certain pedigree, the angels, and they are higher, they're spiritual, and so therefore we dominate. So because the angels went into the sons, into the daughters of men and produced these hybrids, sometimes called the Nephilim the Nephilim or the giants. In other accounts, they refer to the Nephilim as the fallen ones in their pure state, and the giants as the offspring between them and the sons, the daughters of men, or they can refer to the Nephilim as the first generation, hybrid, and then what they have subsequent to that between them, this Nephilim, and the sons, the daughters of men will then become the giants because they'll now be somewhat diluted. But nevertheless, the point here is that Satan in his strategy, because they do not have a single angelic father. They had different fathers. They had different emphasis. Others were gods of war. Others were this and that, and therefore the emphasis was different. So they didn't have of their own. They do not have a unified theology that we are but one, because they saw themselves as different. They emphasize different things. But they're reptilian. Some of them, they had the reptilian, the serpentine bloodlines, and various other mixtures, because they would either have the heads of a bull or a lion or a serpent and things, or bodies, but have the speech of man. And I don't know whether I can say speech of man, because these serpents, they can also speak. But anyway, there would be some creature, which is what God preached against, that you do not marry. One must marry his own kind. It must be kind with the same kind. We cannot have another mixture. So anyway, coming to this here, the first line is basically to say that these people who saw themselves as having a divine right to rule were not united. They don't have a united theology, except in the broad sense that they are from a superior bloodline, which is the angelic, the fallen angels, although the fallen angels would have different strategies, emphasis, and certain personalities, and emphasize different things. And to that extent, we're not necessarily united. But another point, another angle, we can look at it as that Satan now, there was an endeavor for them to be used. Endeavors have often been used to try and unite these different people, and so by strengthening the empire. But this was in vain, because one thing that characterizes these bloodlines is that there is always conflict and infighting. They will fight among themselves. And if we accept that they are the ruling elite in most countries, especially in the West, and now as we see in China and in even Russia, but that's always been the case. These bloodlines were dominating there. And in the Far East, Germany, the axis that you saw in the Second World War is Mussolini and so forth. And the Japanese, they were pushing a certain bloodline with a different angel, whose angel was different, and they were fighting other bloodlines. So we can say that to that extent, these wars will reflect the conflict and the antagonism between these bloodlines and the lack of unity. Anyway, continuing with this line. So men will form, these people, they form their own plans for uniting the discordant. They will plan to unite these discordant parts of the empire by encouraging marriages between the royal families that rule the various components of the kingdom. The philosophy obviously implies that there's a lower order, the common herd, in contradistinction with the more elevated and noble classes, which is the ruling elite or ruling class. Because in as much as Satan would want to unite the whole world under him, to try and impregnate the whole world with his gene or his spirit will become difficult. It create even more infighting. So the idea is to keep it concentrated at the top, which is the feudal system, and they will, through the power, economic power, social power, political power, will suppress and keep everybody under control and make sure that people remain blind, as in the case of the Matrix. People will just go along because they don't know any better. That's the whole idea. So the Bible, on God's part, you see the Bible often makes mention of the poor, the working class, as being very close to his heart and to his plan, his salvation plan. This is no accident. This class is quite oblivious to the conspiracy of the landed class unless they turn to God. But in most of the time, they are burdened and they are more concerned with the day-to-day mundane living and surviving from one day to another. So they're quite oblivious to the conspiracy of the landed class, like ruling elite. And the priests and the knights that underpin this whole system, this whole structure of suppressing the majority. They own everything and the poor people own nothing. And this class, that the ruling elite, are the ones who claim the divine right to rule and govern upon the earth. The serfs, the proletariat, are in the dark even to this day, unless they turn to Christ. And the Bible talks about this to some extent, and I think this scripture gives us a very good idea of what's actually going on. This is from Luke 11:52. It reads, how terrible for you experts on the law. You have taken away the key to learning about God. You yourselves would not learn, and you stopped others from learning too. That's the expanded translation. The Phillips translation reads, alas, for you experts in the law, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You have never gone in yourselves, because they are the gatekeepers, to block people from turning to Christ, because they know when they do that, they are doomed. You have never gone in yourselves, and you have hindered everyone else who was at the door with false doctrine, misleading them and just taking them off course and teaching them wrong doctrine and keeping them in the dark. The Voice translation puts it this way. So religious scholars, judgment will come upon you. You're supposed to be teachers, unlocking the door of knowledge and guiding people through it. But the fact is, you have never even passed through the doorway yourselves. You have taken the key, left the door locked tight, and stood in the way of everyone who sought entry. The Amplified puts it this way. Woe to you, lawyers, because you've taken away the key to knowledge, scriptural truth. The Bible, they used to keep the Bible to themselves, saying that we are the only ones who should tell you what the Bible tells you. Don't read for yourself. And this philosophy and this attitude has continued even to the present day. People are more concerned and more interested in being spoon-fed than reading the Bible for themselves. Anyway, let's continue. Woe to you, lawyers, because you have taken away the key to knowledge, scriptural truth. You yourselves did not enter, and you held back those who were entering by your flawed interpretation of God's word and your man-made tradition. So this is the strategy. So the Satan is established himself everywhere. The whole world is under him. This prince of the air. He makes sure that he's got hold of he controls the education, he controls economic access and productivity and wealth and riches. He controls where we sit, where we eat, what we eat, when we eat, and he controls everything and keeps us in the dark. And education is taking it out of the system. Out of the schooling system, we don't teach people about God. They don't need that. In fact, he teaches them his own theology. Anyway, we continue. So while the object of such alliances, this is the marriages between the royal families who believe they have a divine right to rule, because each one will have his own kingdom. Because remember, there were 70 kingdoms. While the object of such alliances was to bring about unification of the competing kingdoms, oftentimes in conflict. The intent design was to contrive a monolithic force to come up against and oppose God's singular and unfaltering plan to crown his son as King of kings in heaven and earth. Satan's object was, in a peculiar manner, defeated. So now, that strategy would have been the more direct one and would have been straightforward. But I think he's met up with resistance along the way. And now what he has done is he creates two truths which appear to be in opposition. But when they clash, they tend to narrow the pathway for people to go, to the extent that now we've reached a stage where you have so-called two opposing parties espousing different philosophies. But when they're in power, they actually channel in exactly the same way. The language they may use is different, but they channel everybody around one line to hell. But that's his strategy now, which is basically like he created socialism. These are the families fighting. But when they fought this and that, eventually people were to come together. Until now, there is almost like no right wing, left wing. We just have a centrist party theology strategy, which is basically just all downhill with as many people as possible to the abyss. So Satan's solution to the dilemma is to impose a singular personality at the apex to unify all the royal families who will bring about cohesion and execute a universal strategy. He will promote and impose a personality with universal appeal, charisma, in a last-ditch attempt to defeat God and thereby thwart his divine and eternal grand plan. So what he's going to do is going to introduce the Antichrist, who will compel all these he will direct each of all the royal families to work in one direction under his guidance to a common end, which is basically to destroy God's people, especially his treasured people, the Hebrews, was to totally kill them, destroy them, then there should be no trace of them upon the earth. And anyone who wants to go who's enlightened and starts seeing the light, who's comes from the Gentile kingdoms, they'll be killed as well. But the idea is that we're going to have a central command system through the Antichrist and his prophet. So in chapter 40, in verse 44, it reads, "And in the days of these final 10 kings shall the kingdom of heaven set up a kingdom." When he's destroyed all of them, the kingdom shall set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall its sovereignty be left to another people, but it shall break and crush and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. In John 8:44, it reads, now talking about the bloodline, I think that we talked about earlier. It says, "Your father is the devil, and you do exactly what he wants. He has always been a murderer and a liar. There is nothing truthful about him. He speaks on his own, and everything he says is a lie. Not only is he a liar himself, but he is also the father of all lies." He's a deceiver. That's the contemporary English version. And your father, the emphasis in the contemporary English Bible reads, it emphasizes that your father is the devil. You are his children, and you want to do what your father wants. He's a murderer. he was a murderer from the beginning. The Voice translation reads, "You are just like your true father, the devil, and you spend your time pursuing the things your father loves. He started out as a killer and he cannot tolerate truth because he is void of anything true. At the core of his character, he is a liar. Everything he speaks originates in these lies because he is the father of lies." So we're establishing here that we've got a Satan's bloodline. And to this extent now, the Pharisees, some of them full-fledged, were of Satan's bloodline. They were of Satan's bloodline. People may argue it from a professional, that was professional jealousy. They thought that now their livelihood was being taken away because now once Jesus comes, he's the center of everything. And therefore we can't have this because we're enjoying our privileged position in life. And once we get rid of the Roman ilk, we'll be right at the top and running this country. But at the core of it all is that at the core of it, they are Satan's offspring. Yes, they will couch their arguments in certain ways, but they are Satan's offspring. That's what they are doing. They are promoting their father's business, thrust, agenda. In Matthew 12:30, it reads, "Whoever is not with me," this is Christ talking, "whoever does not work or gather with me is working against me. He scatters." Whoever is not working, who's working against me scatters. The Amplified translation reads, "He who is not with me once and for all on my side is against me. And he who does not unequivocally gather with me, he scatters." The Voice translation reads, "Similarly, he who is not with me is against me, and he who is not doing the Father's work of gathering up the flock may as well be scattering the flock." So there is no middle ground here. The world is at war. The world is at war. The kingdom's at war. There are only two sides to the whole fight. There is no middle road for anybody. You are either in here with God or you are with Satan. If you don't pick a side, you are with Satan, but you don't know the truth. This takes us now, I think, in part of this thing. So we're now coming back to another truth now. So now we had the flood. This is God's way of getting rid of all unrighteousness on the earth, to get rid of all the corruption, to get rid of all the violence, to get rid of the bloodline of Satan. But I don't think that's what God intended to do. I think he was just getting rid of all the people who were not necessarily high up, but all the people who didn't believe in him. Because remember that Noah evangelized for 120 years, but when he left, there were only 8. That's him and his wife, his 3 sons and their wives. So this is how bad the world was. There was no one for Christ. But there were some giants who died, but not all of them. But certainly, all the other humans, if there were any, they were unbelievers and they perished. And those are our demons. So they constitute part of the demon group. So in Genesis 9, verses 10 to 16, it reads, this is Genesis 9. We're talking about 24 to 27. We're talking about Noah now. Like, this is after the great flood. And so now Noah says, so reads, "Noah was sleeping because of the wine. When he woke up and learned that his youngest son, Ham, what he had done to him, he said, 'May there be a curse on Canaan.'" That is Ham's son. There are some teachings on that, but one of them being that Canaan, when he heard about the story, was broadcasting it live far and wide, and to that extent, instead of protecting the honor of his grandfather, he was talking about it as something to embarrass him, something as like a highlight, something that shouldn't have been. He should be supposed to be covering his father's nakedness, but he was parading it, opening it up to everybody to hear. So anyway, let's continue. It says, may he be the lowest slave to his brothers. Noah also said, now this is the part that I want to emphasize here. Noah, this is verse 26. Noah also said, and now he's now praying, says, may the Lord, the God of Shem. Now this God of Shem is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why? Because that is their line, their bloodline. Now, here he talks the God of Shem because God had chosen Shem to be the line that he was going to continue his bloodline. That was his choice. That was God's choice, that line of Shem. So now he's acknowledging that the God of Shem, who is the God of Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, and Jacob, be praised. May Canaan be Shem's slave because he was offended by what Canaan had done, or what he was saying. And then he went on now. He says, may God, full stop, give more land to make space for Japheth. May Japheth live in Shem's tents, and may Canaan be their slave. Now here we're having a problem that we see in the story, we see it even in the case of Jacob, that Jacob so loved Joseph that he gave him his coat of many colors before he had actually ever done anything. Here the father chose Japheth over his brothers for whatever reason, that he was more inspired to curse one and then to pray to another God. It's not the God of Shem. To another God he prayed this, that may you, this other God, give more land to Japheth. May Japheth live in Shem's tents, and may Canaan be his slave. So now here we have a situation of double dealing. On the one hand, you are praying to God, and then you are praying to another God, which is a typical thing that we do nowadays. When we mix up theologies depending on what our preference is. He was praying to God, acknowledging God that he's the God of Shem because he saved him and he knew it for a fact. But his love for Japheth was so great that he wanted Japheth to get everything. Yet when God's choice was Shem, but he wanted to disinherit Shem. And Cain, he had already cursed. I don't know whether we should take that cursing to mean it also includes Ham. I don't know. But I think not. I mean, it sounds very specific, unless of course he didn't want to offend Ham. But anyway, so everybody was supposed to be subservient to Japheth, according to the father, to Noah. Now, other translations on this now. The contemporary English translation on verse 27 reads, I pray God will give Japheth more and more land and let him take over the territory of Shem. May Canaan be his slave. The 1599 Geneva Bible reads, God persuade Japheth that he may dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. Now here we're talking about this preference for the son, that he wants Japheth to be very aggressive about this. in one case, he's talking about giving. In the other case, he's saying persuade Japheth to do something about this. And it's almost like a blessing that he's giving him. And then he goes, and this is the Good News translation. It reads, may God cause Japheth to increase. May his descendants live with the people of Shem. Canaan will be the slave of Japheth. The Living Bible translation reads, then he said, God bless Shem, and may Canaan be his slave. God bless Japheth, and let him share the prosperity of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. The New Living Translation reads, may God expand the territory of Japheth, may Japheth share the prosperity of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And the Easy English Bible reads, I pray that God will make the land of Japheth and his descendants grow bigger. I pray that the descendants of Japheth will share good things with Shem. I pray that Canaan will become Japheth's slave. With hindsight, I think the one that is almost true to what actually happened is the translation that is more true to what actually happened is the Contemporary English Version translation, which reads, I pray God will give Japheth more and more land and let him, this is the other God. Now remember that there are other gods. There is God and other gods. Suppose even in there, is it some, in Deuteronomy, yeah, he talks about this council, where he gave them a portion, assigned a god to each nation, each kingdom, because he created 70 kingdoms. And I think it's Psalm 82. His council, he is presiding over his council of gods. So they are the gods, and these are the ones that he's praying to make good, to bring about his desired end. That he so loved Japheth that he wanted him to take everything outside God's will, because this is what he's actually praying here. So he says, I pray God will give Japheth more and more land and let him take over the territory of Shem. And this is exactly, it transpired and materialized in 1948. God did not gather people to Israel. This is the other God who causing all this to happen. And in fact, I was actually reading Rothschild, I think is the one who's taking credit for having created the Jewish state. So here we go. So all this is that this family is the one, as we saw in the case of Adam, in the case of Cain, and his descendants and Lamech, that his children, you have the music, they control the music industry, the filming industry, they dominate the economics of the world. They are no longer just living in tents now. They are more sedentary. But one of their thing is, hallmarks is fighting war, making war, stealing, economic power, political power, social power, power of influence, dominating the whole world. That is their mainstay. And this is where, at the same time, we see them at loggerheads within the family themselves, Meshach and Tubal and Gog and Magog, and now we have the dragon coming into play, and all the other families. They've always been competing against each other. And the First World War can be explained in that way, and the Second World War. And the other one, because they are now fighting for ascendancy and preeminence among each other. They're very competitive. Now, this brings us to the end of part 1, and we'll continue to part 2. And this one with our introspection and meditation. Then I heard the same voice. This is from Revelation chapter 10, verses 8 to 11, and it reads, then I heard the same voice from heaven again saying to me, go and take Go and take the open scroll that is in the hand of the angel that is standing on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel and told him to give me the small scroll, and he said to me, take the scroll and eat it. A symbol of internalizing the word. It will be sour, bitter in your stomach, because it is a message of judgment. But in your mouth, it will be sweet as honey, because it is God's word and because it brings salvation and vindication to his people. So I took the small scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. In my mouth it tasted sweet as honey, but after I ate it, it was sour, bitter in my stomach. Then I was told, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings, and you must share the word you've just received. The Contemporary English Version for verse 11 reads, then some voices said, keep on telling what will happen to the people of many nations, races, and languages, and also to kings. And our benediction comes out of Numbers 6, chapter 6, verses 22 to 27. The Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you should bless the Israelites, the sons of Israel. Say to them, may the Lord bless you and keep you and guard you. May the Lord show you his kindness, make his face shine upon you and have mercy on you. May the Lord be gracious to you. May the Lord watch over you, lift up his face, press his countenance upon you and give you peace. So Aaron and his sons will bless the Israelites, the Israelites, the Hebrews, with my name. Put my name upon the sons of Israel, and I will bless them. Thank you, and may God bless you all.